Welcome to the White Sox REKAP Podcast. I am Ryan McGuffey. We talked last week on the podcast, me and Brian Anderson, about Colson Montgomery and what if this is the real Colson Montgomery and what it could mean for the White Sox moving forward. And then since then, Colson Montgomery has continued to do Colson Montgomery things, hitting 10 home runs in just 32 games, the third fastest White Sox ever. Well, yeah, what if he is that Colson Montgomery? Can the White Sox actually move their timeline up because everybody else is starting to fall in line as well? What does that look like? What does moving the timeline up mean? Can the White Sox actually contend in 2026? All of that is going to be discussed on this edition of the podcast. But first, a quick timeout for something serious. Our friends at the Illinois Tollway have introduced the If Only campaign. If only I had slowed down. We've all said it before. The Illinois Tollway's campaign, If Only, and it's a powerful reminder that speeding doesn't just put you at risk. It affects everyone on the road. Every crash leaves someone wishing they had done things differently. So take the extra time, slow down, save lives, including yours, depend on it. I have a list of pending free agents for 2026. Yes, we are going to go over some of them because, in my opinion, if we're talking about contention, we're talking about spending. What does BA think? We're going to ask him that and a lot more on this edition of the White Sox REKAP Podcast, and it starts right now. There he is, Brian Anderson, back on the podcast, and we talked last week about Colson Montgomery's impact, and we've seen it only continue from there. Not only has he continued hitting home runs, big RBI spots in big spots, go-ahead RBIs. He had one in the Tuesday game against Detroit where the White Sox won 9-6. He busted it open with a big two-run single. And we talked last week, BA, about, if he is a 25 to 30 homer type guy and can solidify one of the spots in the middle of your order, what that does to the balance and length of the lineup to the guys you currently have, and a lot of the prospects that we've seen kind of learn here on the fly at the big league level in 2025. And you and I have discussed these prospects at length over the season because they've been up here in different stages. So now with what we've seen, and look, there's been some things of late where they kind of have taken steps back. They're 500 since the All-Star break. They've cooled off a little bit since that 10-4 start. But with what we've seen from this group of prospects, can the timeline, and I don't even know what the timeline honestly was going into it, because I've told you that I didn't see any scenario where the White Sox could contend until at least 2027. And I guess what I'm asking you to start this is, can that timeline actually be moved up a year?
Well, first things first, Colson's on pace for 60, but no, I mean, it's been incredible to watch that kid. But to your point, I think what it does is it gives fans something to be excited about. So where they might think, or someone like you that says they're 5 years away, that could be something where they're like, hey man, maybe it's 2 or 3, right? And you look at those old teams back in the early or mid 2000s, like the Tampa Bay Rays, and you go, man, I don't remember them being this good. And then they get 1 or 2 pieces, a couple young guys get called up, and now they're cruising and they're sneaking in the wild card game, or they're sneaking in the AL, they sneak in the wild card game in the AL East. And then they beat a couple teams, and then you're playing them in the ALCS.
Yeah, I mean, I look at their roster right now. I'm just going to go post All-Star break, and we know what Colson's literally been one of the best offensive players since the break. We know about the 10 homers as we record this. Only Kyle Schwarber has more RBI, Kyle Schwarber's in the MVP conversation for the National League. So that's the type of second half. Colson, yeah, does he have a bunch of strikeouts? His strikeout to walk ratio, it's not great, but he's a rookie. His on-base percentage since the All-Star break is .269. But honestly, if that's the type of production you're getting, allow some of your other, like my draw's been on the IL. But when you look at some of these other guys, like Edgar Carroll's got 3 homers. He had he had his first home run before the All-Star break, and now he's had 3. I like to see that. We talked about needing more pop from him. He's got an 800 OPS. Kyle Teal, just a couple of home runs. I really like Kyle Teal. He just finds a way. I think he gives a really good at-bat. Guys are starting to kind of find their way. Miguel Vargas is back from the IL. We know Luis Robert We know for a fact he's back in 2026. Like that's their pick. They didn't trade him. We know they're picking up the option. We heard what Chris Getz had to say about him. So there's enough pieces in place. And then Braden Montgomery and some of the guys still pending. I don't even want to talk about pitching right now. Just some of the offensive players. And there might be some regression. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Colson took a step back with some of these power numbers as we get to September. But have you seen enough to warrant, and Chris has said this, Chris has said that they do plan to spend in 26 in this offseason, unlike this year. To temper excitement, I don't see a 9-figure deal coming. They're not going to sign the first $100 million player in White Sox history this offseason. But I personally think it's time to bring in guys that are no longer flip dudes, like the 1 year, $8 million guy. I think you can add one or two of those, but give me a 3-year, 45 guy.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking at like Josh Naylor, who just absolutely makes a living off of the White Sox. I look at a guy like that and go, I don't know. I can't project his free agency. I really can't. He seems like a guy who could get, if you told me he got 5 for 100, I'd be like, okay, in this climate. But I also understand like he feels like a 3 for 50, 3 for 60 type guy. Those are the type of guys I'm looking at. Those are the type of guys. If you told me they added a couple of 3-year deal guys, like this, I don't know if the Sox, for the first time in 35 years, they have a first base problem, I think, because I don't know if Miguel Vargas can play first base. I don't think Curtis Meade can play first base. Somebody's a DH, but not really anybody. So it's a long-winded way of saying, like, do you believe if the White Sox were to add a couple of veterans at that type of spending, that, yeah, you've seen enough where in the AL Central, which is weak, as we know, they can they flutter around? Like, I'm not going to say contention is 500, but for this group to go somewhere in the 80 to 82 win stage, like I would call that a year ahead of schedule. Can you see that?
Yeah, I mean, first off, how dare you think the White Sox are going to spend money? But to your point about Naylor, Naylor's going to get grossly overpaid. So are the White Sox going to do that? But there's going to be a team out there that they're going to overspend for that bat. And in regards to Colson Montgomery, I hope it's not this year, but there'll be a point this year where he's going to slump. I mean, it's going to get ugly. It's called baseball. I mean, I watched Jermaine Dye hit 2 home runs in a game and just look like he couldn't get out. And I believe it was the same series in Kansas City. He was 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts, and he was up his 5th time. He was 0-2, and Pods was on first, and Pods got picked off on purpose, so we didn't get the quadruple golden sombrero, whatever you call it. So, I mean, Colson Montgomery's going to slump, but it's
everybody.
Like,
I mean, look at the Cubs right now. Like the whole team slump. Like that happens. The point is like when your star slumps, there's 2 or 3 other guys that are cruising and picking you up, not 9 guys all going in the tank at the same time.
Yeah, it's like, but he's going to slump. But the crazy part is the White Sox have been relying on him so heavily right now because his bat's been so great, and he's putting up one of those crazy numbers this year as far as like the Bobby Witt Jr. types. We're like, hey, did he just hit 11 home runs or 12 home runs this month? He has that kind of juice. But you know what's got me most excited? I was thinking about a comp earlier today before the show. Maybe not the power, but Edgar Carroll, he gives me Victor Martinez vibes. You know, that really kind of smooth bat as he progressively gets bigger and stronger, add more power. But probably a better catcher than Victor Martinez, but from what he lacks in power, he makes up for on the defensive end.
Interesting comp. I mean, you want to talk that guy to me now in Chicago, probably not underrated because of that guy made a living off of the White Sox.
Oh, God.
He was a 32 WAR player. That guy was, I would think, dude, but speaking of which, I'm looking at as soon as you want to know his career numbers against the White Sox, 323, 396, 498. He had 32 homers and 131 RBIs. Shockingly, the most home runs of his career against any team came against your Chicago White Sox. Really nice count.
They used to post up Jim Tome's career home runs per team, and it was like gross. I mean, first off, he had 30 plus homers against every team, but I think the White Sox popped up there and it said like a 56.
I know. I mean, so many guys made a living. So I'm looking at. So I went down the old Google train, and there's projections that Naylor 5 for 100 is kind of where it lives, but his market value on Spotrac is 16 million a year. Okay, so maybe that's like 4 for 64. You're probably going to have to overpay. I'm looking at because I'm only zeroing in on Josh Naylor, but like there's other guys out here like Bo Bichette's going to get paid. He's young. That's not the type. He's a shortstop. The White Sox, they're not going to go after a guy like Bo Bichette or Kyle Tucker, obviously. But then you start going down the line here, like Duran from Boston is an outfielder. That I think the White Sox. Part of me thinks like if you could find a way to trade Andrew Benintendi, or maybe just cut bait on Andrew Benintendi, that's something you consider. You're not signing Cody Bellinger, who's going to get paid and look to be with a contender. But you start going down here, BA, and like Cedric Mullins. Like I'm not going to give you sexy names, but I'm going to give you names that are.
I like the Cedric Mullins call though. I've been a big fan of him from afar, and that's a justifiable sign right there. You go get him for like maybe a 4 for 80. And put him in center field or let him roam around and rotate, man. Like, and I'll tell you what, it's Baltimore, and Baltimore is a great place to hit, but that kid could come here and do something special, hit 25, 30 home runs, play a great defense, and see what happens. But I like that kind of sign.
I thank you. That's because that's the kind of sign I think. To me, if we're talking about contention, and then I haven't even I do think you need, and Martin, like in all fairness too, like Chuck, our guy Chuck, and you're doing great work over at CHSN now with Chuck. He did a podcast with Martin Perez, who finally returned from the IL. I shouldn't say finally. I give him a lot of credit because he could have just taken it, gone to the shelf, and thought about 2026. But he fought back to get back to the White Sox. Went 3 1/3 in his. I know he got the loss. He gave up one flip and run and got the loss, but it's good to have him back. I think he's going to help some of these young guys down the stretch in terms of eat some of their innings as they all hit the 100 innings plateau for the first time in their careers. He's got an interesting option. I don't think the White Sox pick it up for $10 million. I think he could be like a renegotiate type guy where, hey, we won't pick up the option, but we're going to find a lesser number that makes sense for both of us. I still think if you were to add, like, let's say like a Mullins type and or Naylor type, I'm probably not both. Then you got to go down and find another pitcher type. And, like Jack Flaherty has a $10 million player option. He hasn't had a great year. He probably opts out and becomes a free agent. And then you start looking around at a lot of these guys that are probably going to make more money than you're willing to spend. But can you get like Chris Paddock just got traded to the Tigers, right? So like he was a deadline acquisition. He'll be 30. He's a type of guy, like some of those mid-rotation guys that can eat up innings. I'm curious to see what Michael King gets from the San Diego Padres. Of course, Dylan Cease is a free agent. Dylan Cease is going to get paid. He deserves to get paid. He should get paid. But there's just a lot of guys in like that 30 to 32-year-old area that you're like, they're not sexy names, but they don't have to be sexy in order to get paid. Like Zach Gallen's going to get paid a ton. Right? Ranger Suarez is going to get paid a ton, either from Philadelphia or somebody else. But I'm looking more like I'm looking more in like the Chris Paddocks, Shane Bieber's going to probably opt into his player option. Like Walker Buehler, like I don't know what he's going to get. Zach Eflin.
You're mentioning some really interesting names here. I need you to refocus, though, Guff. Like what about how much they're willing to spend, and to your point,
if you're willing, hang on, I'm interrupting you real quick. If you're saying you can give, so you mentioned 4 for 80 for Mullins. Let's say another pitcher gets 3 for 60. Okay, so we're spending 20 per. You're picking up Luis's 20 per. You're still got to have a payroll in the low 100s.
Yeah,
very low 100s.
No doubt. But I was just thinking. I go. We talked about pitching, adding a couple pieces here, maybe in the back end, middle relief, which are really important. But shoot, if you could just take this White Sox pitching staff this year, maybe shore up the staff towards the end of the game. I mean, I like that. I would rather add a couple bats and just keep the pitching how it is. I would like to see maybe like a 70% additional like spend on the offensive side and like a 30% on the pitching side.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think they've done a really good job over the course of the last few years and really over the course of time of adding that veteran 1-2 year deal pitcher to help with a young rotation. And then they've never really addressed the offense. They've like let the guys they have just try to come to form or come back from health or whatever. And they've never really done the Adrian Hauser, Martin Perez to the lineup. I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, even if they have Martin Perez this year, right? Even if he sticks around, that's another piece, right? And I think they can keep the core group of young guys, even get Jonathan Cannon back. Maybe he figures a couple things out as he progresses back to the big leagues. And this offseason, he starts tweaking a few things. But you get that core group of guys back, and they start to progress. You add a bat or two, then maybe we're talking, like you said, sneaking in that wild card game.
Well, and I don't know. Whoa! Pump the brakes. I'm not going that far. I'm not.
See how I said what you said?
I do. I appreciate you putting words in my mouth and acting as if I'm not paying attention to what's going on, because that was not going to work for me. Like, you look at like a guy. Like, there's some guys like they have like Shane Murphy. What he's doing in AA Birmingham right now is absolutely asinine. Like, has a 1.32 ERA, a WHIP of 0.79 as a starter.
That's absurd in the minor leagues.
It's absurd. And we haven't even mentioned, like, obviously Hagen Smith, who's kind of had an up and down year, and Noah Schultz. Like, those guys are like, the rotation has reinforcements that are younger and honestly probably better. Like, they're top heavy better, but they're probably not ready. You're going to have to, control their innings and nurture them at the big league level while you're allowing other guys to continue to take steps forward, like Shane Smith, Sean Burke, etc. But I do think if you added not another Martin Perez, I'd be cool bringing Martin Perez back. But I'm looking at like, if they're serious about contending, and I don't know if that we're speculating here. We're trying to say we've seen some stuff from the young core of guys that they have to say, okay, like, I'm hat tipping to what's going on with the White Sox right now over the last 2 years, because the guys they've brought in that they've identified, they had to make hard decisions. We can't judge any of these trades yet. We can't grade the Garrett Crochet trade right now, because if we were just grading the Garrett Crochet, it's an A for the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, you think?
and then that's it. Like, it's incomplete on the return. It looks good right now for both teams. It's impossible to give that grade for another probably year and a half.
Yeah.
So I think you hear Chris, like, the problem is, here's the problem, because I think they do owe it to the fans to spend money. I do. I really do. Yeah. And I'm skeptical of it. I am. To what you were saying earlier about pump the brakes, about spending. I'm looking in the camera, and I would tell Chris, I would love if they signed a couple of these guys we talked about. If they signed one, it'd be a step. But if you're signing Cedric Mullins for 4 for $80, and then you just go like this, put your hands up, aren't you like half-assing that when you can do that to both sides, both the rotation or the back end? BA, like, we haven't even talked about that. Yeah, Grant Taylor, are they going to transition him back to starter? They're going to keep him as the closer? And if it's fine, I'm cool with either. You can keep him as the closer. You need to spend on some dude in the 8th or 9th inning. And I don't care if that's a 1-year deal, maybe a 2-year deal. I don't care about, like, but they are 9-26 in 1-run games. They are 9-26. Yeah. It's horseshit. It's really bad. And think about if they were that's 37 or 35 games, right? So let's say they're 17-18. Think about what we'd be talking about with the White Sox right now. They'd be 8 games.
You'd be saying they might be in wild card contention next year with a couple of additions.
They'd be in 50 win territory, looking at a non-100 loss season right now.
Yeah,
just in 1-run games. They have to address that. You're relying on a bunch of, with all due respect to the guys in their bullpen, you're relying on a bunch of guys that don't know who they are yet, and they don't know what role they're capable of yet. And Ethan Katz has gone out there and put these guys through the pitching lab, and I give him a lot of credit. Like, what he's been able to do with that pitching staff this year is absolutely fantastic, and give Brian Bannister credit. The problem is you get to 5 2/3 and 6 inning on, and Ethan Katz he's
scary.
you and I out there. He's literally like, he's a dartboard, and we don't always know who's available and who's not. But he's literally trying to ride some guy's hot streak because you just don't know. These guys haven't done enough on the back of their baseball card, and you need to help that out. And next year, I think if we're even talking about contention and they haven't addressed the back end of the bullpen, that word should be removed from everyone's vocabulary next year.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Chris Getz too, and I mean, I know this sounds a little bit manipulative, but if I'm Chris Getz, I have a chalkboard or a group of guys that I want to go get, probably on the lower end. Let's be conservative here. Maybe 2 or 3, like 2 for 20s, 3 for 33 type deals. But if anything else, if I'm Chris Getz, I'm getting a hold of like Jeff Passan, and I'm saying like, hey, we're in on this guy. So he starts pushing it out there and saying like, oh, we were in on Naylor, but we only offered him 4 for 80, but he took the 5 for 100. So it'll be interesting. But you have to figure the White Sox are going to take 40 to 50 million and say, okay, Jerry, Chris got on board. We have this bucket of cash. Where can we allocate these dollars? Because I think to add an additional $50 million for payroll, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I do too. And I'll give you another name. Like, give me a guy like Kyle Finnegan to be the back end. Like the guy, these guys never want to give up that role of the 9th inning as they get older. And that's fair. They should not be sitting there going, yeah, I'll settle into my age and where I deserve or where I belong. He'll be like 34 years old.
Yeah.
He might have to contemplate 1 for 15 from a team that's, a playoff team, or 2 for 22 with the White Sox, and try to, knowing he could be flipped, by the way, at the deadline if he pitches well, but he's guaranteed to close. That's the type of, I'm throwing names to me that I'm trying to be in the White Sox front office pool right now and say, I know when they say spend, it's not the largest contract in White Sox history. Although Cedric Mullins 4 for 80 would be that. Insane. But I don't see $100 million guy. I do see 3 or 4 dudes in that $60 to $80 million range and lower that could make this team really freaking interesting. Really freaking interesting, because you have a manager that the clubhouse respects and likes, and they have something going on from top to bottom. And I'm talking through the minor leagues for the first time in a long ass time, for decades, first time in a long time. And with the right allocations, the right spending, and it would still put you near the bottom in payroll. It would probably still protect you for the most part from a strike in 2027. And it would keep all of your assets that you've grown and acquired and are learning at the major league level, and then the levels right below it, it would keep them all protected. So if there is a strike, and let's hope there isn't, when they come out of it, they could be as in position and look as good and attractive as any young team in baseball. I can't believe I just said that because I kind of want to throw up all over myself, but that's what I think.
And to your point, we're talking about free agent signs too. White Sox got some trade chips in the minor leagues, and with Will Venable's connections, and remember all these guys, Banny, Josh Barfield, you got, Katz, Getz, these guys all have extremely good connections throughout baseball. And don't think that like Will Venable's not keeping his eye on a few guys maybe down in Texas, that he goes, hey, they're I know that he's not doing great for them, or they're over this guy or down on this guy. We could probably go give them a couple trade chips and go get a back end guy, or go get a middle of the rotation starter, or maybe go get one of those pieces that they have in the minor leagues that just needs a change of pace. So I look at them to get creative through the trade realm as well.
As long as you're not getting like younger and more projects, unless it comes at the expense of like you're getting rid of bad money on top of it and paying down like some of Andrew Benintendi to acquire that guy. I think Vargas has shown that he's definitely worth keeping around in 26 and seeing what he is, because he's shown signs of hope, right? Like he's been a roller coaster as a bit, but he's had enough success where you're like, okay, that feels better than last year. Curtis Curtis Mead's another one of those. He's a Miguel Vargas comp, like high-rated prospect in the Rays system, and they just ran out of patience with him. Although I do always question when the teams like the Dodgers and the Rays trade those guys. But I'll give the White Sox the benefit of the doubt. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Like there might be a couple of wins. And that, I mean, Adrian Hauser was the trade, so that was a win. Eric Fetty was the trade, and like those are wins when you are able to bring those guys in and get stuff out of them. But I really want to believe that they see a window here, but I don't know. And we're going to put a bow on this speculative talk that we're saying because we got plenty of time to talk about the hot stove and free agency. That's coming.
Yeah.
I mean, that's coming when this season, as soon as this season goes dark for us, we start looking at the roster going forward. But I guess I'll ask you this. I'm going to lose the word contention. How about that? Do you think the White Sox, I don't want to say, do you think the White Sox can be a 500 or better team next year?
I absolutely do. I think this year you brought up two great points. You go add two pieces on the offensive side and maybe one back end bullpen guy, and then you go and you win. You know, you play 500 ball in those 1-run games. It's not great. You don't have to be a great team to play 500 ball in 1-run games. You just have to be able to close. And so I think if they're on the other side of that percentage wise, like instead of being so drastically bad at 9-30 something or 9-25, you go, even if you go 15 and 23 or something like that, anything like a lot, you just can't be single digits and double digits. So I think if you do that right there, you're around a 500 team.
Yeah. And like for everybody, it's like, well, I do want to say I'm looking at the White Sox since here. I'm going to pull up MLB records since June 1st. And again, I want to preface this by saying, well, we don't want to give, the White Sox they're under 500 and we're sitting here talking about the good stuff. I understand that. But like, we're looking at this team as the worst team in the history of baseball a year ago. And now we're talking a year later.
They won't be.
We're talking a year later about the possibility of them being in contention or being a 500 club. And I think that that's important. I really do. I think that that's important. And when you look at, I wanted to look at since July 1st here. I mean, the Brewers are doing like historic things. So what the Brewers are doing, like they're 38-9 their last 47 as we tape this, which is absolutely insane. But you look at the White Sox, okay? Since July 1st, the White Sox are 16-21. Is that world-beating baseball? Absolutely not. But I'm going to say this. They have a same record as the New York Yankees in that time. They are a half game better than the LA Dodgers during that time. They are a game. The Tigers are 17-20. The Astros are 18-19. The White Sox are playing right there with clubs that are going to the postseason thinking they can win a World Series. It's a 20% sample size of a season. Okay.
Hey, but to your point, we're sitting there, we're going, no one's gonna freak out. You're like, man, Cappy might freak out if the Cubs are. If the Cubs are 16-21, like, what are you doing? But for us right now, if we would have been talking before the middle of the year and said, man, the White Sox got off to a 16-21 start, we would be freaking out, being like, look at this team go.
I know. And like you look at them since the All-Star break and they're right in the middle of the pack. I mean, the White Sox have a better record than the Astros, the Cubs, the Tigers, the Yankees, the Dodgers.
That's
since
crazy.
The All-Star break.
That's crazy.
So the question is, can you do it now for 162? I think they put April behind it. The roster looks a lot different than it did on May 1st, certainly April 1st. I'm going to answer the question this way as we put a bow on this. Do I think they can contend? No, I don't. I don't think they can contend because to me, contention is that we're sitting here a year from now, they either are in that third wild card spot or better, and they're no less than, I'll give them 3 games. They're no more than 3 games out of the wild card. So 3 games are out. I'm pessimistic about the amount of money we just spent on this podcast. I want to be dead on and exactly right. Because I do think if they do enough to still be near the bottom in payroll, they could be a really sexy, interesting sleeper in a division where the Twins are going to rebuild. The Royals are never going to spend a lot. They're going to try to find middling guys. The Tigers are this is their window now. And then the Guardians are always going to Guardian. The Guardians will always threat the needle and find a way to win. So it's an interesting division if the White Sox make interesting moves. If they sit there and go out and acquire a bunch of 1-year flip guys or have a lot of Michael A. Taylors and Austin Slater types, well, I will be sitting here talking about the same stuff a year from now.
Hey, that should be your slogan for next year, or when you talk to Chris Getz. Don't be contender, be a sexy, interesting sleeper. Period. We got to end the podcast on that. I'm going to get you a T-shirt made. Says be a sexy, interesting sleeper. Period. That's all.
If you and I walked around wearing that shirt, huh? Yeah, could you imagine if we just walked around wearing that shirt? The amount of
there'd
be a lot of thinking.
Interesting sleeper. Sox baseball, right?
2026. We go from the kids can play to sexy, interesting sleeper.
I'm writing that down right now. Hold on. Sorry.
Please
I'm writing that down.
Please do.
I have to.
You write that down when I get our read-in for our fine folks at the Illinois Tollway. Quick timeout to talk about something serious. We've all said it before. If only I'd slowed down. The ad campaign, if only, from the Illinois Tollway is a powerful reminder that slowing down doesn't put you at risk, or speeding doesn't put you at risk. It affects everyone on the road. Every crash leaves someone wishing they had done things differently. So take the extra time, slow down, save lives including yours. Depend on it. And the way people are driving on the Illinois Tollway these days, they're frustrated and pissed. I've seen it myself. I'm just happy to continue to maneuver through it. So happy to have the Illinois Tollway as a proud partner of this podcast. To my sexy, interesting sleeper, Brian Anderson, who's good job, man. Good job. I like our slogan. You can tell Chuck he can borrow it.
That's all you. No way, man. It's going to be.
You should bring it.
Every time I say it, I'll be. Yeah.
Can I challenge you to something?
Say it the next time I'm on TV.
It doesn't have to be the next time. Get it in.
Bizarre.
Get it into a CHSN broadcast.
You got it. It's already done. It's already done.
Brian Anderson, you're the best, pal.
Thanks, buddy.
That puts a bow on this edition. Can the White Sox contend in 2026 podcast? Ooh, a lot of what ifs, but man, sexy, interesting sleeper sounds pretty damn good. We appreciate you watching this edition of the podcast here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the recap. Click that notification bell so every time a new podcast drops, you get the alert and you can listen to BA and I debate and talk about the next or most interesting White Sox topic or what's going on in the White Sox world. For all of you listening on audio only, we appreciate that too. Make sure you subscribe to either Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. For Brian Anderson, I'm Ryan McGuffey. We'll see you next time on the White Sox Recap Podcast.